What's going on, everybody? All right. How are you all doing today? It's a pleasure to be here on this wonderful, wonderful Thursday. Let's wake up! I had to make sure everybody's awake. I am just getting home. And I'm getting everything situated right now. But man, oh man, oh man, do we have some things to discuss. That's right, folks. The penultimate day has arrived. Resident Evil 4. I am super excited for this. I'm doing good, Lily. Hope you're doing well. All right, what do you say let's get into this? I say we get into it. What's going on, everybody? This is the Notorious Base, and today we are back with our live Resident Evil retrospective series that we have been doing for a couple weeks now. And man, oh man, is it a pleasure to be here. Today we're touching on a game that not only changed the franchise of Resident Evil itself, but also changed games as we know it. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, a game that is on every top 25 list video games of all time, and also one of my personal favorite video games of all time, that reinvigorated my love for a franchise that I already held so deep in my heart. It feels so good to be here today. Yeah, man. Lily the cat says, I'm great. Let's go. Gemini says, it's so good to see you live again, brother. Yeah, man. Life comes at you fast, and it's been a little hectic, but we're here. And for all of those that are, you know, going to be coming in a little bit later on, or maybe just catching the VOD, right? It's always important for us to make sure that we set the tone here. Now, we're going to have some Resident Evil music playing in the background, obviously, while we do this, but let's talk about this. The year was 2005. I was almost 11 years old. My dad was heavily into Resident Evil. And man, did he bring home a masterpiece. Yeah, I went live doing a couple of practice speedruns not that long ago, but I haven't been able to do one of these in quite a bit. And as long as you guys hear me okay, we're going to get into this. Now, if we look at the screen, this guy, not these, oh, how did these guys get on the effing screen? Okay, we're back. This gentleman that you see in the center, one of the main focal points of Resident Evil protagonists by the name of Leon S. Kennedy, has encapsulated so many fans for so long. Right? This is Leon S. Kennedy. He is a fan favorite, our bowl-cut knight in shining armor, always risking his life to save the heroine, right? But where did this begin? And what happened with Resident Evil 4 is a true question that we truly need to ask ourselves here. Because I don't know if you all know, but with Resident Evil 1 dropping in 96, Resident Evil 2, right, having a little bit of a delayed release in January of 98, and then we got Resident Evil 3 in 99, well, the real question is, why did this come out in January of 2005? Was it the upscale of graphics? Was it the change of gameplay? Mr. Kennedy. No, guys, it's actually much more than that. A 6-year-long hellstorm of production took place, which actually we covered in one of the YouTube shorts and TikToks that you could find the link to my TikTok right over there on my YouTube channel, linked inside the bio, where we drop a lot of short form content, as well as on the YouTube shorts category. We discussed that Resident Evil 4, in fact, had multiple changes in its development, which actually led to a few other series coming to be. Now, to me, that's fascinating, right? Resident Evil 4 sparked so much love by players, diehard fans, and alike. And although there may be some backlash, right, that it took the franchise and brought it into a new direction. I love those shorts, says Lily. They make me laugh so much. I appreciate that, Lily. We put a lot of hard work into them, so that really means a lot that it puts a smile on people's faces. That's the point, right? And we're trying to make people enjoy what they're watching. So thank you so much for that. But Resident Evil 4 holds so many memories deep inside of my heart because I connected so much with my dad on Resident Evil 4. All right, let's take a look at Resident Evil 4 gameplay while we talk, right? Because I feel like that's so important. Why didn't I just go to YouTube? Ooh, full game professional. So we're going to have this play while we talk. This game was revolutionary, says Gemini, and he is so right, okay? So obviously in the opening of the game, the beginning, right, we're going to break down a couple different things here. We're going to talk about the game itself. We're going to talk about the cut content. We're going to talk about games that actually came from the development of Resident Evil 4 and the magnitude that this game had. When I discuss with you guys that this game was not just revolutionary, but it also fostered so many mechanics the games later on used, right? We had games playing like Gears of War. We had games playing like even Ghost Recon, right? Future Soldier. The creator of the Ghost Recon franchise, right, even said that he was a big fan of Resident Evil. And of course, one of the most prolific horror franchises ever actually restructured their model after Resident Evil 4. That's right, I'm talking about the Dead Space franchise, people. All right, we got some people coming in here. Let's get the music going. Let's get some Resident Evil 4 feelings. So obviously in the beginning of the game, we get a little bit of explanation as to what's going on here, right? Leon opens with a wonderful Matt Mercer voice actor. I'll never forget it. It was the year those grisly murders occurred in the Arklay Mountains, right? Now we're setting the stage here, okay? We're setting the stage here. We're just going to let this play in the background because why the hell not, right? This is the opening. This is the game that we all came to love. Resident Evil 4 is a vibe, y'all, says Lefty Bear 87. What's up, my brother? I hope you are doing well and welcome into the stream. Resident Evil 4, right? Think about it this way, guys, and everybody who's going to check it out in the previous broadcast section later on. Resident Evil 4 wasn't just a Resident Evil game. It wasn't just a survival horror game. It was an all-time great. It brought people in that have never even heard of Resident Evil before. It attracted fans of all, right? All alike. That were like, wait a second, this game is popular. What is this? Man, when I tell you guys that this game had a lasting impact, the memories I shared with my dad on this game, right? The merchant mechanic being the first of its kind. Oh my goodness gracious. Woo! Let's wake up in here! Let's wake up! What I like to see. So once again, guys, this is the Notorious Base. I do a lot of challenge runs, no damage runs over here on the YouTube channel, but we're also branching out and bringing new content to the channel, as well as TikTok. All survival horror news, comedy skits, you name it, we're bringing it on top of our normal challenge runs. So sit back and relax, because we got a lot to discuss here. So let's set the tone, right? We got a lot. We got a lot. A lot. I'm going to let these guys take the floor. Not this guy again. Look at these guys. All right. So we got the making of Resident Evil 4. This is a video that I really wanted to show you guys because I found it very, very, very fascinating. I found this one very fascinating while I was going through, right, my trek of uncovering different old archived clips. Now, this was a behind-the-scenes trailer of Resident Evil 4 2005 and when they were making it. So, very interesting. And what's actually interesting is it's fitting that the day that we're doing the Resident Evil 4 retrospective live, the Devil May Cry series just dropped on Netflix. And the reason I bring that up, right, is because our favorite director, Hideki Kamiya, actually created the Devil May Cry franchise. Carlos. And isn't that incredible, right? So let's break this down really fast before we get into this behind the scenes. I'm going to list off a few things that I want you guys to hear. Resident Evil 4. Devil May Cry. Haunting Ground. And even parts of Unimusha, right? Now, Unimusha came out in 2001. So 4 years prior. 4 years prior to this game coming out, but still had some game mechanics and ideas that resonated from Resident Evil 4. Again, unbelievable. Let's take a look at this. Let me make sure that I have the sound unmuted for you fine folks over here. All right, let's take a look.
Six years have passed since that horrendous incident. I received special training via a secret organization working under the direct control of the president. I was to assume the responsibility of protecting the new president's family.
Coño, why am I the one who always gets the short end of the stick?
You, who are you really? Come on and tell us.
The biggest change is that the game now has a fully polygonal engine, characters, and backgrounds. We've also gone from a fixed camera to a rear camera, more of a first-person perspective. The actual controls themselves haven't really changed all that much, although this time Leon will be able to aim for specific body parts like the head, arms, stomach, or legs. I've worked on a number of Resident Evil titles in the past, and honestly, I think the series had been recycling the same patterns, the same gameplay each time. The creators were starting to get bored with it, and many moved to other projects. So I spoke to Mikami-san, the director, and we talked about reshaping the series and winning back the fans, as well as winning over new fans who thought they would never play a Resident Evil game. So, in order to revitalize the series, we've given it a complete makeover. There are a lot of things that are brand new to the Resident Evil series. You can use the action button to jump over things, get in vehicles, jump out of windows, fight enemies, things like kicks and throw moves, stuff like that. Earlier Resident Evil games have all been in everyday settings, allowing you to see your environment crumble around you. But with this game, you're entering a completely isolated world. We've tried to represent that and convey the different kind of fear you would feel. Up until now, we've made our pre-rendered backgrounds very intricate and detailed, but now we have actual moving backgrounds and we're focusing more on the...
Look at what they're using right here, guys. They're literally, this looks like Windows XP. This might even be Windows 98. Who knows at this point, right? Like, and I think it's so amazing. Let's see. Oh my God, the music. Gemini Bits, the pesetas music. That's right. Gem did use that. He remembers that pesetas. The dynamic damage improvements were really game changing, right? That is something that, like I said, and I use this word not very often, but it was prolific. It was revolutionary. It was game changing, right? Resident Evil had drifted away from the still backgrounds that it used once upon a time on the PlayStation 1. And then when it went over to the Sega Dreamcast, we had the 3D art rendered backgrounds for Resident Evil Code Veronica and Code Veronica X. This game decided, let's put the camera right behind Leon and we're following him. Like we're documenting everything that this guy's doing. Yeah, Lily, they were using these computers back in the day. Because keep in mind, when Resident Evil 4 came out, it was January 11th, 2005. Now, the reason I don't forget that date is because it's actually my brother's birthday. So happy birthday to my middle brother, right? January 11th, he got one hell of a fifth birthday when he was 5 years old. But he actually, this is one of his favorite video games of all time. So it's really fitting for him, right? And it's just incredible what they were, and just like if you look at the polygons and the things that they're making in the background, like the 3D CG, like the rendering, I mean, this had to have been unbelievable, right? And we're going to talk about all the different versions of Resident Evil 4 before we talk about the games, but I just want you guys to see this behind the scenes.
And having fun moving around. The biggest thing, of course, would be that the environments are really expansive. We also had to integrate the indoor and outdoor areas, blending each area or section of the game seamlessly. This was quite a challenge. With this game, we're using non-English dialogue, mainly Spanish, for the first time. And I think that really helps make the atmosphere of the game new and fresh. And of course, we all...
And I think this was so well done for early 2005, right? Because, like, let's say you weren't fluent. Happy birthday, Other Base. I appreciate that. I'm sure he would be happy to see that when he watches the VOD later on. Thank you very much, everyone. But think about this for a second. Unless you're fluent in the language of the country or the town, right, the village that you're in, it was a foreign language to a lot of us, right? Back in 2005, right? Now, you know, I have a lot of friends that were bilingual that could obviously translate a lot of what was going on for me. But imagine reaching a village, not understanding the language, villagers screaming at you basically like you're an outsider and they don't like you. I mean, that already added an extra layer of tension to what we already had. You had an ominous, gloomy presence. A message that the president's daughter had been kidnapped, and they sent a secret agent, Leon S. Kennedy, that had been training at this time for about 6 years into a place that he had never been before. Remember, this picked up Resident Evil, and already, yes, we had moved it to Rockford Island in Code Veronica. We had moved it away from Raccoon City, but now we're in a totally different country. Now we are literally in an unnerving, unsettling, unfamiliar environment. And when we're in a place that we're unfamiliar with, right, that causes a sense of tension. That actually causes a lot of tension. So, I mean, to me, it really made things unnerving. It really cemented the fact that Leon did not belong there, right? And I think, Jem, you summed it up perfectly. Leon, it almost felt like he was so out of place. Hector says, hi. When the game came out, everyone in Tijuana, Mexico, was loving the language, having fun, specifically Correjo por atrás. Now, forgive me if I did not pronounce that right, Hector. I am not bilingual, and I really want to learn Espanol, which in Spanish means something very different. So see, having a take like that from Hector is just really fantastic. And thank you so much, Hector, for jumping in the stream and being here. I think it brought an unnerving, unsettling feeling to the Resident Evil franchise. Being out of your own element, not understanding the language. This was revolutionary. These guys went above and beyond.
I hope
Just
players
absolutely
listen,
massacring
especially to
everybody.
the first handgun you start off with, and appreciate the work we put into making the sound.
聞いてほしいなと思います。
Okay. I said it okay. I'll take that, man. Thank you.
There are no zombies this time around. Instead, you'll see some new enemies. Leon is confronted by a strange group of villagers, but these villagers aren't really human. They are these awful creatures. You'll have to play the game and solve the mystery to find out.
Right, all right. So we're setting the tone for what this is. Right? We're understanding that this game, as we just talked about, took a massive step away from Resident Evil as we knew it. As we knew it. Now, the development of Resident Evil, as we know, was anything but fun. So we're going to bring our man, Avalanche Reviews, Jared, on the right on here right now. You know, and I'd love to have him one day on a stream or even in a video. I do have to definitely reach out to him. He is one of my heroes. I love him over here on YouTube, and I love using his content. He is fantastic at what he does. And you know what? The thing I respect about his retrospectives the most, right, is that he's not biased. And I think that pisses off some of us, right, in stream or the watch it after, like, oh, man, how the hell could you be saying that about my favorite game? It's like, well, you know what? I'd like the honesty. With practice, you'll be able to order tacos anywhere. The game was perfect for Halloween of 2005, says Hector. That is fantastic. I got to start practicing. But yeah, this is going to, we're going to break down the retrospective because Jared just covers it so well. We have so much stuff to go over, man. I don't even know where to begin. There's just so much with Resident Evil 4. 6 years of literal developmental hell. Hideki Kamiya originally stepping in to actually direct this game and stepping away to work on Devil May Cry, which we got to cover. We got to cover Devil May Cry and all about that. So let's take a listen to our man Jared from Avalanche Reviews and his RE4 retrospective, and we're going to break some of that down.
Well guys, this has been a pretty long journey so far, and here at the series midpoint, we find the game that changed everything for this long-running franchise. Not satisfied with the direction RE was going in, director Shinji Mikami, in a bout of absolute psychosis, decided that the switch to Nintendo's newest platform, the GameCube, would be the perfect time to drop all pretenses of survival horror and go with the straight-up action game he had been trying to create since Part 2. With a renewed creative energy and a hammer forged from ridiculous amounts of hype, Mikami proceeded to drive the last nails into the survival horror coffin. Yes, people, today we are taking a look at the mold from which all other RE games would be formed. A game that fractured a fan base and altered video games as we know them. Now whether or not this was a good thing, well, I guess we'll just have to find out. What's up everybody, I'm Jared from Avalanche Reviews, welcoming you to part 4 of the Resident Evil retrospective.
All right, so Jared always does a really good job at introducing what Resident Evil is, or the one he's going to be talking about, right? Like, I mean, this guy's part of none a gangster. Oh, damn, I got chills for the PS1 chills hearing that noise, says Gemini. That's right, in Halloween night. I always, you know what's weird? This is definitely like a comfort game for me, and I think I go back to it more often than I should. I'm actually replaying it right now. Nice. I played all year, going crazy trying to unlock everything, especially the bottle caps. It was so interesting, Hector. I never knew how to unlock the bottle caps until my buddy and Zombie Slayer actually showed me, because back then I I would say like over 10 years ago now, I didn't even like pay attention to the bottle caps. Like I saw it in the strategy guide. We had it for the GameCube at the time. And I was like, what the hell are these bottle caps? I was maybe young at the time, maybe just didn't put a lot of thought into it. But once I figured it out, oh man, just so cool. And it felt like so rewarding, the shooting range as well. I always thought that was a lot of fun. And obviously the PRL 412, a gun that unfortunately was not brought into the remake, which we will talk about in a little while. But let's listen on.
RE4 started its life in the early 2000s, and much like almost every RE game up to this point, suffered some major setbacks along the way. Throughout the game's creation, it went through not one, but two completely scrapped builds. The first was an attempt at a stylish action game and an emphasis on fast-paced combat. This build dropped the series' iconic pre-rendered backgrounds along with, well, really everything else Resident Evil was known for. At this point, things were so far off the rails that even Mikami thought it was too much of a departure. But instead of tearing it down and starting over, series regular Hideki Kamiya decided this would be its own standalone release known as Devil May Cry. With all of their hard work now tied up in a brand new IP, the development team, now working under Hiroshi Shibata, started from scratch and created a new scenario that saw Leon Kennedy infiltrating Umbrella headquarters.
Boom. Okay. So we just revealed something big. One of the major builds of Resident Evil 4 was Devil May Cry. Originally, his name was going, the main character was Tony Hargrave, and they were going to be infiltrating. He was a detective, I believe, right? The shooting range was addictive, says Hector. I agree with that. It was a lot of fun. Tony Hargrave was going to be the main character of Resident Evil 4. Let me try that again. Infiltrating one of Oswald E. Spencer's mansions or castles, right? And this was supposed to be his actual home where he lived, not just the mansion that he housed the experiments of Umbrella. So a major twist, and obviously we know that Devil May Cry is filled with stylish action, right? Getting SSS, it was one of the first times you saw a triple S rank, as you know, using all these crazy diverse combos in order to make a game really, you know, fly off the rails. It's incredibly contagious soundtracks, right? Heavy metal, heart pumping, adrenaline action was just a total 180 from Resident Evil. So I think at the time, right, when Hideki Kamiya was first working on it, that was when director Shinji Mikami had stepped in, and as Jared said, it was way too off the rails. But Capcom did not want to scrap it. In fact, they salvaged it and actually brought it over to make its own franchise that's still going today. We had just gotten Devil May Cry 5 a couple years ago now, and we just got a brand new animated series on Netflix. Actually, today it came out, which is incredible. DMC became its own entire universe. RE4 not only revolutionized Resident Evil, but so many other facets of media. And Gemini would be totally correct. We are going to talk about these games as they, right, as they show, because obviously there were two builds prior to this one, and one of them being Tony Hargrave as the main character and not our hero, our hero Leon S. Kennedy. But what's interesting and something that I actually figured out, I think before we go ahead and continue, one thing I want to show you guys that I noticed in the original Devil May Cry 1, right? Serenity. Let's see if we could hear it. Devil May Cry, Ancient Castle, RE4 Serenity share a sample. Now understand something here. Resident Evil 4's Serenity theme has a sample in the original Devil May Cry. And I heard this on my own while I was replaying the HD collection for the PS4 a couple of years ago, maybe like a year ago. And I was blown away. It shows you how intertwined the original Devil May Cry. Now, we know that 2 and 3 and 4 and all the rest, right? They really started to branch themselves away from being anything related to Resident Evil, right? So I think that was just incredible. So I want you guys to hear this. Ready? Check this out. What's up, Noble? Welcome into the stream. Hope you're doing well, brother. Listen to this. You guys hear it? Hear that noise? That's the Serenity sample. Holy shit. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard that before. I don't know if you guys knew about that, right? Like, to me, that was just so cool. It showed just how much of this was like literally from the birth of Resident Evil 4. Devil May Cry is a outstanding, fantastic series that I recommend everybody go definitely give a shot. Let's listen to it again. So this is the Devil May Cry Ancient Castle theme. Now it's going to be slowed down. Holy crap. It is sneaky, right? Ready, listen, right here, this part. That part right there. So the sample was obviously used in Devil May Cry. I remember running around inside of the ancient area and just being like, wait a minute, why do I know this theme? Where the hell is this from? And I was just, I don't know. But anyway, that's my ADHD kicking in, and I thought you guys should know that because that was just a cool little tidbit that I had found out in my travels. So let's continue with our man.
Getting infected with the progenitor virus. This build was labeled the Fog version and was a little closer to a traditional RE game. In fact, it included classic enemies like zombies, and if the trailer is anything to go off of, classic fixed camera angles too. Around the 40% mark, this build was scrapped for a completely new story and gameplay style. This would commonly be known as the Hookman version and introduced a lot of ideas that would survive the transition to the final release. This build included the familiar over-the-shoulder perspective and the inclusion of QuickTime events. Taking a more supernatural approach, this attempt had Leon facing off against possessed toys and suits of armor moving around on their own. And of course we can't forget the titular Hookman, who appeared to be some type of ghost. I feel like this would have been a bad fit for the series, and unlike the unreleased 1.5, I'm kinda glad it never saw the light of day. After this phase, there was yet another shift dubbed the Hallucination version, but this was more of a story and setting change than a full restart. This build was also shut down as it was deemed to have been too expensive to produce. After this, there was an attempt at a more traditional RE game, which was scrapped due to it being too formulaic. And finally, after covering the most fucked up development timeline so far in the retrospective, we've come to
Resident Evil 4.
So obviously we could talk about the Hookman build, right, for a little bit. The Hookman build was more of a ghost-like entity that was possessing dolls and things within the castle. The Spencer Castle took place in the same location. They wanted to use that castle, man. They were not giving up that damn castle. They weren't giving it up for anything. So it's almost like interesting that they had just so many aspirations for what this game was supposed to be and what they wanted it to look like, but then they ended up just saying, nope, we're moving on. We got to do something totally different. And what they did was they actually didn't scrap that castle altogether. Okay? They didn't scrap the castle altogether. What they did with the black fog creature, right? They didn't have a Hookman, right? There was no Hookman, was just a canceled project, but there was also a black fog project where a black fog would captivate an area of the castle. This was a very like a later build in the Resident Evil 4 like development. And what they did was this came out. This game right here. Have any of you heard of this game before? This is a hidden gem, very underrated. And I feel like a lot of people have actually never heard of this. This is a Capcom title, and it is called Haunting Ground. And I want to ask you guys to look at the logo. Look at the logo of Haunting Ground for a second there. Okay? You see the Haunting Ground logo in the middle? Now, it's not going to look exactly alike, right? Let's look at the key quick, right? So look at that. Look at that. Now, it's obviously not alike to a degree. They're not like a one-to-one, right? But we see a little bit of ideas used to create Haunting Ground. Now, for those of you who don't know what Haunting Ground is, I'll just give you a little bit of a, little synopsis for what it says over here. Haunting Ground is a survival horror video game developed and published by Capcom in the year 2005. The story follows Fiona Belli, a young woman who wakes up in a dungeon of a castle after being involved in a car accident. So obviously they took the castle idea. Devil May Cry went with the castle idea, but they went in totally different directions, right? This had some really dark tone themes to it that I'm not going to say over the YouTube airwaves because I don't want the video to not be monetized. But if you're interested in what this can be, right, or what it is, right, we could go ahead and watch a trailer for Haunting Ground in a little while. But to me, this is just so fascinating, right? The Resident Evil 4, not only was it just, it came out to be a perfect game, but it just like, it ratified like literally everything that Resident Evil 4, it made other franchises. It like, imagine making a game and you create 3 franchises out of it. That's nuts. Gemini says, I may be a little early in bringing this up, but do you think the Hookman Black Fog elements were utilized in separate ways remakes Pasanta Boss? No, that's not far off. Well, think about it. Leon does save a dog at one point. What could that be a nod to? Haunting Ground. He saves the dog or the wolf from the bear trap, and then he helps him fight El Gigante, right? I do want to answer Gemini's question here. Do I believe that it was utilized, right? I do. I think that a lot of their ideas, because one thing we noticed about remakes in the Resident Evil franchise was that remakes finally decided to do something that the originals didn't do, was actually bring some stuff from their prototypes or their respective builds and add little pieces, right? Ambience into the game, which I thought was just so awesome. Right on the money, Gem. Very good, man. Very good catch. And I think, you know, we've talked about Haunting Ground now for a little bit, right? We're talking about so many different things, man. I mean, Devil May Cry is probably trending at this very moment. But we have to, you know, we have to keep up with Jared's video. But Devil May Cry created its own franchise here as well, right? It's an urban fantasy action adventure game created by Hideki Kamiya, right? Our Lord and Savior. It primarily developed and published by Capcom. The series centers around a demon hunter, Dante, and his efforts to thwart demons' invasions of Earth, right? So this guy's name was originally Tony Hargrave. They changed him to Dante, right? He has a brother, Virgil. They're like yin and yang, those two. They don't get along for shit. But man, I have been yapping for a bit here. Let's listen to Jared. He's got more insight than...
And the worst title announcer in series history. Really, Capcom? Come on, you used to know how to do these things right.
Resident Evil 2.
Anyways, RE4 starts out by cutting ties with half of the established series lore. It seems that Leon Kennedy, having survived the T-Virus outbreak and subsequent nuking of Raccoon City, had been scouted for a Secret Service job protecting the president's family. After his daughter is kidnapped by some radical cult, the president sends Leon to Spain, and that's where our story picks up. After about 1 full minute of gameplay, it's clear that Mikami was really jazzed about finally breaking out of the series mold. Yeah, sure, why not kick us while we're down, you fucking sadistic bastard. On a personal note, I think I might finally understand how Devil May Cry fans felt after DMC. But I digress. The rescuing of a damsel in distress soon turns into a bit of intrigue when we find that this cult has access to some type of ancient microparasite known as Las Plagas, and all of its members have had their bodies and minds hijacked by it. As far as stories go, this really isn't a bad justification to get Leon in numerous ridiculously contrived situations with a parasitic hive mind. The rescuing of the president's daughter is about as campy as it sounds, but it's played straight here, and I can at least give the game credit for that. And this is where I have to put my foot down. For some reason, the fedora-clad uber dorks that make up games media are always praising RE4 on its tongue-in-cheek humor and premise, and for the life of me, I've never understood why. Listen, people, there is literally no difference between this...
I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
and this.
Here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
4 is not some type of hipster bastion for ironic comedy. It's a game with poor jokes written by people unfamiliar with the concept of English humor, just like every other Resident Evil game in the series. Please stop looking for ways.
So, what Jared is trying to say here, I always thought that it was more of the dopey action hero puns that like Leon S. Kennedy was known for, right? Like in the RE2 remake, hope I don't have to write a report on this. Or he goes, what else does he say? He's like, man, this is not how I imagined my first day. You know, like he just always had the dopey punchlines, and I think they really capitalized on this being like an action horror game, but really more so action than anything. I mean, this is an action survival horror. This is action horror. So again, like it was a breath of new air into the franchise, but I don't think anybody actually thought that it was going to, I mean, they thought that it was going to take off the way it did, but do we think that it was actually going to influence now 5, 6, and really get to that clusterfuck storm that we ended up seeing? Dennis Potter, what's going on, man? How you doing? I thought RE4 was set in Mexico. Would have made more sense than Spain. I mean, possibly, right? But it was an interesting take that all of a sudden a random person kidnapped the president's daughter. The real question is, how did he get close enough, right? And we end up finding out that that was actually Jack Krauser, one of Leon's old lieutenants, right? Or Major Krauser, I should say. I'm sorry, wrong rank. That ended up jumping ship. It was almost like, you know, they needed an inside man to do the abduction. I do agree with Jared here, says Mr. Geminem. But at the same time, we always have loved the awkward, cheeky voice acting aspect about the early RE games. I see, like, and I totally agree with you here, man. I feel like that's something that Jared is a little bit missing in this review, right? Is that that's what makes this game so charming. Like, yes, there's loopholes in the stories. Yes, there's things that don't make sense. Yes, there's a self-destruct button in literally every game, even probably when you start it up. But that's what makes this series so appealing. And that's what I always loved about it. And just the fact that they brought it into the new age, right? The 2000s, 2005 being a strong year. I don't know. I just really thought that it was good. I think it fit the mold really well. Spit some bars, Geminem. But yeah, I'm loving this. So let's continue on with our man Jared. And let's hear him out for what he has to say, right? As he's the pro.
To justify loving every aspect of this game. It's a little sad, okay? Alright, moving on. Surprisingly, the most poorly executed parts of this story all stem from having very minute elements of Resident Evil shoehorned in. I mean, take the general idea of a special agent rescuing a VIP from an evil cult under the control of an invasion of the body snatchers type of parasite. Maybe not the most nuanced tale ever told, but it's clean and it fits the game world. The parts of the story that are supposed to tie it to the larger Resident Evil lore feel unimportant and sometimes just lazy. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like that they included the fact that Umbrella was shut down when the facts of the Raccoon City incident leaked, and it's cool to see two familiar characters meeting up again, but this stuff accounts for less than 10% of the story. The Umbrella Corp gets mentioned a while.
Now that's something that I want to talk about real quick, is that I might get a lot of hate here, right? And thank you so much, guys, for tuning into the stream. I do appreciate it. I'm going to get a lot of hate here. Resident Evil 4 has probably one of the weakest stories in the franchise. And I know people are going to say, you know, Notorious, come on. Resident Evil Survivor exists. There's other, and I get it, right? I'm not talking about spin-offs. I'm talking about main line. The game was so good in every other facet that literally all you had to do was make a bare bones story and it was perfect, right? It definitely wasn't like a bad story, right? They capitalized with the Los Illuminados and they capitalized with the cult and all this stuff. I know, le gasp, right? It's taboo. It's against, it's really against, it's like a sacrilegious attack, right? But it's true. To an extent. If we really look at it, Resident Evil 4 succeeded in everywhere that it literally didn't need to worry so much about its story. That they could literally do just the minimum amount of stuff to make it enticing and let the gameplay, the music, the sound, the voice acting really take over everything. And I would love if people disagreed. That's totally fine. Definitely leave it in the comment section or in the chat section. I have no problem with it. But I think it's important to really recognize
3 times, and only 2 of those times are actually verbal. As for the history between Ada and Leon, well, that really only exists if you've played part 2. My point being, if this stuff is so inconsequential to the game's story, why the hell was it included? Now, I know what you're thinking, but hear me out. Close your eyes and think of everything you know about RE4's story. Now imagine the microscopic amount in there that calls back to the previous games in the series. Alright, you with me so?
And I totally would agree with you, Hector, right? And in no means am I discrediting Resident Evil 4. I mean, they could do worse, I guess, says Lily the Cat, right? I don't want to sit here and act like I'm absolutely at all discrediting Resident Evil 4 story. It is a great story. All I'm trying to say is that if you look on it at the surface value for what it is, it's not really that deep of a layered story. And of course, I do agree with you. Those movies were trash. The first one was okay. Again, didn't really fit the mold of Resident Evil, but I could watch that movie. I have no problem with it with Alice. And the Netflix series we pretend never existed because you're right. It was garbage. It was hot, warm New York City garbage. Terrible. Terrible. I totally agree with that. Oh, that Netflix series made me fear for the franchise. Well, yeah. I mean, when we got Resident Evil 6 and then, we got 7, which was a masterpiece. And then all of a sudden they made, what was it? What was that other one they made? It was like a CG series. It was like only like 4 or 5 episodes. And even that was kind of mid. I mean, in truth, right? I'm not going to lie to you guys here. Like, I respect all of your intelligence and I respect all of you. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. Some of the stuff was just shit they were putting out. And look, man, let me tell you something. When I tell you that Resident Evil, what was it? The Netflix series? That shit might have been one of the worst things I've ever watched. Now, R.I.P. to the legendary actor Lance Reddick, right? He was fantastic, and it's not his fault. Yep, that one-stop shop to Midtown, says Jem. Absolutely. Now, it wasn't Lance Reddick's fault. It wasn't Ella Balinska's fault, right? I want to pronounce her name correctly. It wasn't any of their fault. Their acting wasn't bad. But the story and what they decided to do with it was awful. You're welcome, Lily. Right? We saw Resident Evil. We got excited for a Netflix series. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I know we're talking about the Resident Evil 4 retrospective over here. But what do we think about the Barbarian director directing a brand new Resident Evil movie? Now, again, Resident Evil movies other than some of the CGs like Degeneration, Vendetta, Damnation, even, Death Island. Ryan! What's going on there, buddy? Good to see you. The CGI series was made by Capcom, at least it connected to the games. I'll agree. I do agree with that, Hector. Trust me. That was definitely not like bad on the level of like the S.T. Perry movies and not S.T. Perry, I'm thinking of the books. The Wes Anderson movie series and also, the Netflix series. Lance Reddick was the only positive in the series, in my opinion, says Gemini. Everything else was so far removed from the source material, I just found it very pandering. And I do agree with that. Like, it was such trash. Like, it was kind of like they were trying to insult our intelligence was what they were doing. They were like, we're just going to paste the name Resident Evil on this series, and we hope to God that it sticks. Like, you just threw garbage shit on a wall, and you were like, hopefully it sticks there. I mean, come on. Give us something to care about. That's why I know having faith in a Resident Evil movie that's good is probably something else that's taboo, because Welcome to Raccoon City, I don't know. I don't know what to think. That was horrible. It was horrible. Really, all the CGI movies I was fine with. But I don't know. Like, let's continue before I go on a rant about that. It was DEI garbage. I mean, honestly, a lot of it did have different, diverse, like, features and things in it, right? And maybe because they were branching too wide, right? Like, you ever hear the saying, father stretched his hands too far? When you try doing too many things to appease too many people, you go away from the core values of the fan base, and the fan base has to come first. I'm sorry, that's not any knock at changing the way things are, but the fan base has to come first, because that is what made your content big. That is what made Resident Evil blow up as the second biggest Capcom franchise behind Monster Hunter. Just shoehorning everything in like they did made it really uncomfortable for me, says Gemini. A huge fan of the franchise who spent the whole thing wanting and trying to enjoy it. It almost felt like they were spoon-feeding us like dirt-flavored baby food, and they were like, you're going to eat this and you're going to like it. It was trash. It was trash. Let's call a spade a spade. It was dog shit. Okay? I mean, you know, we can't do exactly. That's exactly what I'm trying to say, Lily, is, you know, if you stretch yourself too far, you'll pull away from what makes you who you are, right? The temple, who you are as a person, or in this case, the Resident Evil franchise. So when you insult the intelligence of the fans and the people that love these games for what they are, then they're not going to pay the money for them. Sure, you'll get people that will definitely spend the money on it to review it, or they'll get Capcom codes, but Capcom finally started to listen.
Okay, now imagine that tiny little bit wasn't there. Is it that radically different of a story? Trust me, this is a theme we'll be revisiting in the video in a lot more detail. So in the spirit of brevity, let's move on to gameplay. Now, any of you watching this, regardless of your experience with the original games, are likely to recognize this setup. RE4 may have been praised more than any other game in recent memory, and as we just found out, it wasn't for the Oscar-worthy plotline. This constant over-the-shoulder perspective / camera angle, whether you like it or not, revolutionized third-person shooting and made it what it is today. This close-up angle does a couple of things very well. First, and most obviously, it keeps a sense of tension in combat.
The tension in combat they're talking about right now. Well, which was interesting, and I'm curious to hear with everybody here in the chat things. Did you like the camera angle that they used in the finished product of Resident Evil 4, or do you think what they were going to use in the Hookman series, kind of a mixture of a 3D behind, not really, it was like behind the back aiming when you aim, literally, and then it was kind of like fixed camera. What did you prefer? I know this is the finished product, but what did you think was better? Let's see. Gemini says, doing well. Thanks, Ryan. How are you, brother? Hope you're doing well, Ryan. Hector says, yes, it was. And then they made another movie with real bad casting. I mean, like, that's the thing, too, right? Like, Welcome to Raccoon City was just an absolute bundle of snowballed shit. It was terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. And again, I'm sorry. I know that usually I don't do much cursing, but I get very passionate about the Resident Evil franchise, so forgive me, guys. The armor monsters freak you out. I agree, Hector. They were definitely pretty awesome. Definitely scary. We're going to be talking about, after we watch this retrospective, the cut content. I loved Over the Shoulder, says Gemini. It was a refreshing step away from an action-based combat-heavy game. It just worked. Hector says, I did. It was cool to feel that it was necessary to watch your back. Both takes are fantastic right there. You want to know why? Because I thought the same thing. I thought that since we're going to be making the game so action heavy and action oriented, how the hell were you going to do a game in a village where they're chasing you all around and keep a fixed camera? Like, sure, it's possible, but I feel like it would take away from feeling like you're being chased with an axe, like this gentleman on the screen looking dead into Leon's eyes, right? And always having to watch your back, like Hector said, that was so important in this game. Because you just couldn't freely move back, right? You had to hold the analogs, what'd you have to do? The D-pad and press A and do a quick turn back. You didn't know what the hell was swinging at you or grabbing you. I thought it worked. Really comfy mechanics for non-linear gameplay, says Lily. Yeah, I would agree, right? Non-linear gameplay, it was, and really, at the time, Resident Evil 4 was the longest running Resident Evil game, right? You went over to the village, the castle, and the island. The island is one of my least favorite parts, but again, monumental. That was a total dumpster fire, says Ryan. Which one was a total dumpster fire? Are you talking about the movies? Because the movies were dumpster fires.
Like the original Resident Evil games, hiding enemies behind cinematic camera angles, RE4 uses its limited field of view to keep you on your toes. This mixed with a relatively slow turn speed makes for a nice little panic attack when you hear a hoarse voice behind you cursing in Spanish. It also makes crowd control more essential, and since we've touched on that, let's talk about the game's new addition to the bestiary, or more importantly, what it's missing. Nowhere in this game will you find a single zombie. Yes, the main reason for the franchise's existence are absent here, which sucks, but also kind of makes sense in a weird way. In place of the Walking Dead or the Ganados, people who have been taken over by the Las Plagas parasite and are now just a walking flesh puppet for the gross alien-looking thing growing inside them. Since these maintain some semblance of mental faculties, it's not uncommon to see them wielding bats, knives,
Holy
chainsaws,
shit.
crossbows.
The Regenerators, the Iron Maidens, right? Those were fantastic creatures. And I think that was also, right? The creature design in this game was just amazing. It really was. The creature design in Resident Evil 4 was monumental. Shout out to Mr. Tibbs, who battled through episode 16 today. What's interesting is that he actually, I think he misspoke because I'm pretty sure it was episode 17 and he said 16 in his video, but it was a really good video. I watched it while I was at work. I mean, Mr. Tibbs puts a lot of hard work in. Go show him some love, Mr. Tibbs 1992. He's on a couple of projects over here at the Notorious Base. Hector says, when you're aiming to hit one in the middle of little plagas and one creeps up behind you, yeah, right? One thing I found that was very interesting I noticed in the 4 remake was that it felt like the camera was off-center, so every time Leon shot, I felt like I missed so many bullets. Or maybe I'm just bad. It could be that. Gemini says, you know what I don't think was planned but also works? The fixed camera angles created a vulnerability and lack of control. RE4's new camera angle gave you more control, which Leon would have now, which is very interesting, right? And I think that, like I've said in previous retrospectives, Silent Hill and Resident Evil actually had that hand in hand, right? Resident Evil had the fixed camera angles that showed vulnerability. You didn't know what was on the other side of that angle. To where Silent Hill, right, it kind of had like that free roam type of feeling in a town, but it masked it by using the fog. So it got away with it. So it was like the fear of the unknown. It worked so well. Big love to Mr. Tibbs. Ryan Wood says, the movies, bro, they were trash. Spot on, Big Ryan. Spot on. I felt like we were feeding us fillers. Fillers until something were deemed popular. That's the thing, right? Like, they started off with the first movie, Wes Anderson. You had me in the first half, then I was like, all right, it's getting a little corny. Then you dropped the second movie, and you had Nemesis in it. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. And Jill. Like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? I was like, wow, this is actually pretty nuts. And then you dropped whatever that extinction shit was, and that should have just extincted the whole series, because after that, it was trash. I think they actually brought the dude in from Prison Break to play Chris Redfield. Now, he's not a bad actor, but a weird, just very odd choice. Dennis Potter says, isn't the guy behind Resident Evil 4 the one who created the Evil Within? That's right, Dennis. Shinji Mikami, after he left Capcom, right? He went over to a different company and created the Evil Within franchise that a lot of us really do love. I love the Evil Within 1 and 2. Probably will get some hate for saying this as well, but hey, I love being taboo. I like the Evil Within 2 better than 1. Am I up for a playthrough of that masterpiece? Yes, actually. Yes, I would really, really like to do a playthrough of the Evil Within 1 and 2 over here on the channel. Again, like I was saying a little bit earlier to everybody in here, I do a lot of challenge runs and no damage runs of the Resident Evil franchise, which you could find in the playlist on the YouTube channel. But we're starting to drift away and do a little bit more on the channel and the ideas of content. So I would love, right, I'll take requests and we'll put up a poll on YouTube after the stream today, and we'll really discuss what people want to see. Because I'm doing it. I want to do this with you guys, for me, but not just for me, for you, because I want us to enjoy what the hell we're doing here. Let's wake up in this chat, baby. Let's go. So we're watching Leon get absolutely spanked right now by an axe while beautiful music plays in the background. Right, and I just want to see, what does he cover here? He's talking about the gameplay, the good, and he talks about... Okay, so it seems like in the first half he's shitting on Resident Evil 4, and then we actually get to a point where he starts talking about the good. Nemesis was so underpowered in that movie, it felt like they did him dirty. Yeah, I mean, look, his special effects for the time it came out, he looked pretty cool, but he was weak as shit. You're right. Evil Within is a masterpiece. Lots of Easter eggs of Resident Evil, says Hector. Absolutely, Hector. Evil Within is fantastic. It's a really, really great series. I love the Evil Within. Sebastian Castellanos, right? Detective. See, I know it. I love it. You know what else was a really good game made by Shinji Mikami and Suda51? Shadows of the Damned. I recommend that as well. Very, very fun game to play. But let's continue with our man Jared. We're going to talk more about some cut content. We're going to talk more about Tony Hargrave, right? The original protagonist of Resident Evil 4 over here. And I know we're bouncing all over the place, guys, so forgive me, but there's so much to cover with Resident Evil 4 that, man, we're going to be streaming for probably close to another hour, and we still may have to do a part 2 of this video. Imagine that. The writing in the movies was all over the place. It completely fell apart in the third film, says Hector. Perfectly said, man. And I think that's, you know, I totally agree with you. It's like, okay, 1, I could watch. 2 was, and then 3 was like, oh, this shit is terrible. And then I didn't even watch anything else. I love the aesthetics from The Evil Within, says Dennis. I would agree with you, Dennis. It was really... I like how you kind of go into like that dream world, and then the nurse is always there, and the music that plays on the music box, like the what the hell is it? Record player, because I'm losing my mind. But yeah, guys, we're going to be streaming for another hour, so stick with me, and we're going to really dive deep into Resident Evil 4. And again, like I said, there's probably going to be a part 2 to this video, because you just can't cover Resident Evil 4 in one sitting, so let's continue.
Complicated mining equipment, the addition of smarter enemies that can climb ladders, open doors, swing swords, and generally just mess your shit right up would have been a terrible idea when the series was still rocking tank controls and fixed camera angles. But the radical change in perspective seen here is actually pretty geniusly pulled off. While walking around, you'll notice that Leon is always just a bit off-center. This gives you a good amount of screen real estate unobstructed by your character, which in turn works perfectly with the uncomfortably close-up position the camera takes. The intersection of these two seemingly unimportant mechanics allowed Mikami to maintain a bit of the tension that came with the old, limited perspectives, while ramping up things like enemy speed and aggressiveness. When aiming, the camera zooms in and keeps Leon in the very bottom left-hand corner. As a fan of immersion, I have to say, keeping your character on screen while going into this zoomed-in aiming mode helps lessen the disconnect between me and what's happening on screen. And continuing on this point, let's talk about the simplistic genius that is this laser sight. In most shooters, you can expect to see an aiming reticle on screen at all times. Without this, players would have no idea what they're shooting at, but never before has it been so perfectly worked into the game world.
I think that the aiming and the shooting in Resident Evil 4, just like Jared's kind of saying, it was perfect. Like, it was like you could literally aim that laser sight and you knew you were going to crit somebody right in their skull, right? Man, this makes me want to play Resident Evil 4. Well, that's the idea, Hector, man. I'm so happy you said that, and I'm glad you're enjoying yourself, which I hope. And thank you for being a part of this stream, man. Can't wait to see you in more, right? And this game is just it's just an effing masterpiece. Let's be realistic. We'll probably watch some gameplay towards the end of this stream, right? Just to get ourselves in the vibe to all go play it. But, I mean, he talks about the gameplay here for a while. Looks like he actually shows a little bit of Resident Evil 5, which we're going to be covering next. But let's go ahead.
The laser sight in RE4 not only makes for some staggeringly accurate shooting, but it also feels like a part of the game's world.
If you miss, it's your own fault, says Hector. Couldn't agree more, man.
The only real issue with this style of aiming is how
a lot of people yell and scream online that they can't hit a shot, but
maybe
it's just a skill issue.
Held in the very bottom left corner of the screen. The good news is this is a very small annoyance and is easily made up for by the immersion factor. And since we're on the topic of immersion, let's talk about the other thing that this game made a household name. RE4 uses a ridiculous amount of QuickTime events, which, now that I think about it, sounds weird saying since I don't think we even had a name for these things back then. Whether it's running from a boulder, ripping off your own Hollywood movie, or just shaking a bad guy off you, expect to be mashing some combination of buttons at some point most of the time. And this is where I surprise no one by saying that I've never really been a fan of these things. Not sure why, but they've just never clicked with me. That being said, the QTEs in this game are actually pretty fun. I haven't decided yet if this is due to them being good on their own or just a cheap way to increase my stress factor, but either way, I enjoyed them. Now, some of you that have been with me for years may remember me saying this.
And if that didn't destroy immersion enough, just wait. If there's one thing that ruins a game's dark and scary atmosphere, it's large, colorful button cues.
And yeah, that still stands, even though I actually got a nice sense of satisfaction from narrowly dodging a falling axe with a few frames to spare.
All right, so I feel like, you know, I know he's being very unbiased with, right? Like, we all sit here and we praise Resident Evil for everything it did. He's obviously looking at it through a very big magnifying glass to try to find any, you know, and I understand that, right? Being as a retrospective or a reviewer of a game, right? You got to be critical, because if you're not, then you're just biased. And at that point, what the hell are you doing? Lily the Cat says, I felt like QuickTime made me lose immersion a little. Bingo. Where's everyone going, bingo? I hate QTEs, QuickTime events. And I think the game that used it the absolute most was Resident Evil 6. Then again, that game is trash. Sorry if you like it. I say it proudly over here. I mean, got to remember, this game came out at a time where it was the mid-2000s, you know, and then we had, obviously, 5, and we had 6. They came out in the early 2010s. It was all about that QTE, gameplay to try to... It was a way to try to actually immerse the player more into the game, and I feel like it actually brought the player less immersion. How do you try to do... And I feel like they do this all the time when it comes to things, right? They try to add a new mechanic or a new thing in, and it never ends up reappearing, or maybe it did so well by accident that they keep bringing it in, or they choose not to. Now, we heard a lot about his good... Right? We heard a lot about his tougher take, right?
The limited power of its GameCube origins. I can't really remember a GameCube game with more impressive real-time lighting, and the volumetric fog was just unheard of. Little effects like exploding heads and drip.
So here, this is where he's actually going to give the things that he loves about this, and we're going to break down different parts of this, because this is important. This is what he thinks is good about the game. I'm very curious.
Grotesquely detailed and equally impressive. Another aspect of this game's look that blew my mind at the time was how far the draw distance was. Now, don't get me wrong, this wasn't exactly an open-world game, but the combination of some really complicated environments and a lack of obscuring fog was an odd combination for a console game of the time. Now, Capcom aren't miracle workers, so of course all this comes with a limit of 30 frames per second, but you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone complaining about frame rate when there's a graphical marvel to sing the praises of. The footage you've been watching so far has not been from the GameCube original, but trust me when I say that this game set the standard for console graphics at its time. It would have been easy for Capcom to have tried to save space by pre-rendering all the game's cutscenes, but I'm glad to say they took the opposite route. 99.9% of the game's cinematics are rendered in-engine, which made it age surprisingly well, and make sure that those of you wanting
Get the music on. We gotta talk here. We got a lot to talk about. Holy shit. Holy shit, man. They're just dropping nukes on us. Gemini says, even with games that wove QTEs into their cinematics really well, like God of War, it prevents you from paying attention to the masterful cutscene for the fear of missing the button cues. You know what actually did that, but in a very subtle way? Had small, very small QTEs. Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. If you actually go back and play it, there was prompts to press R1, to look through the binoculars. Cool. It was a cool part of the immersion, but you could easily miss it, which was actually an achievement or a trophy. And it's like, I totally agree with that take, Gem. It's like, I'm trying to watch excuse my French, I'm trying to watch a goddamn cutscene. Okay? I don't need to be pressing the bumper in A just to make sure I do a backflip while a laser's aiming at my head. Hector says, the Krauser fight was an insane button push and misses. And then it happened out of nowhere. Remember the giant in the lava that grabs you? Yeah, that shit was so weird. That was weird. I agree, Hector. Yeah, Gemini, you can't enjoy it. It happened with the Krauser cut. Out of nowhere, knife in the chest. Yeah. You know what it was? The knife scene... The knife part in the original OG was fine with the QTE. That's my take. But that should have been it for QTE in this game. Like, if you wanted to put like a singular part of a Resident Evil game to just have like a QTE event, that's fine. But when you like ingratiate it into the entire game, and we always have to worry, is a cutscene gonna have a boulder crush me? We could just have Chris punch it. But you know what? We didn't at this moment. So it's very interesting. It's interesting, like, right now we're looking at Luis's crotch, which is an interesting pause of the video, right? Lily the Cat says, haha, I love the jump scares, though. Like the oven guy, yeah, that guy scared the crap out of me. I remember one time I was playing RE4 and I went downstairs in the chief's house and I ran into the bathroom and it was the urinal and the camera was like panned up and then all of a sudden I see the guy, the villager, in my face and I literally almost shit my pants. It was terrifying. But man, oh man, I had so much passion to this. And one thing I'll say to you guys here is Resident Evil 4 has such a significant place in my heart because I just spent so much time playing this with my dad, right? Spending time with my dad, or maybe who you spend your time with, your loved ones, is a huge part of what you do. Or maybe you just like spending time with yourself, right? But taking time to play a game and to spend it with somebody you truly love and care for, it was an experience like no other. And I think that's why I love it so much. Gemini, shall I knife him? Says Big Ryan Wood. That was fun, Lily. I'm glad to see everybody having a good time here. I'm so happy that we paused it literally right on his crotch. Amazing. Yeah, you try to hire a video guy named Albert Wesker. He doesn't show up for his job, so guess who has to control everything? Yours truly.
Original non-HD releases won't have to worry about any block boundary compression artifacts. That being said, you know I have a couple of raindrops for this parade, and most of them can be summed up by this right here. RE4 goes a little crazy with the button prompts. I mean, these people spent time and money creating a light beam effect for dropped items, but for some reason thought we needed an extra incentive in the form of a big bright graphic on screen to remind us the action button we've been using this entire time performs actions. Luckily, this is about my only complaint with the game's presentation, which now that I think about it is kinda odd for me. Yep, this is an impressive looking game, even judged against today's standards. The original release still holds firm as a tech demo for how far the GameCube could be pushed, and serves as a rock solid base for some mixed quality ports. Now, we all know the Resident Evil series is no stranger to a large library of ports, but RE4 is kinda special in the sheer amount of adaptations that have been released. Surprisingly though, most of them aren't worth picking up, which makes my job a little bit easier. The original version was released around 2005 and was supposed to be a GameCube exclusive, but we all know how Capcom treats exclusivity deals. Not even a full year after the ink dried on their agreement with Nintendo, a PS2 port of RE4 was pushed out the door, and this made sense at the time. I mean, the PS2 was the best-selling console by a whopping margin, and Capcom definitely didn't want to leave the room with money still on the table.
Capcom definitely didn't want to leave the room with money on the table. Sounds pretty familiar. And not just with Capcom, but a lot of AAA creators, maybe back then 20 years ago, because yeah, this game is 20 years old this year, but also now. I talk about this a lot when we talk about the retrospectives, and I'm so glad to see everybody in here. Thank you for joining. Video games in this day and age is just hollow. I'm not going to lie to you. It's either the Dark Souls series or Soulsborne games are carrying video games. Nintendo's dropping another Zelda and Mario, or we're getting a remake or a remaster of a game that was actually good. I just got a notification a second ago that Brutal Legend with Jack Black is getting a remaster. On Mr. Tibbs' stream, he's been playing Croc. That has a remaster, right? Assume we're going to have remasters for everything because it feels like games can't tell a story anymore, right? And it almost felt like in that moment when I was sitting there in a light way, right, insulting Resident Evil 4's story. This story is better than most stories that we see now. And I'm not, look, that is not a shot at any games that people truly do like that are out now. I'm just saying I could probably list in my hands and toes the amount of good games or amazing games that have come out for this new gen. I mean that. And if anybody really wants to challenge that, we could talk. Right? I'm always up for a conversation. Francis! Greetings, y'all. Did I make it in time? My apologies for my late delay. Had a late lunch. It's now 6:40 p.m. here in the great state of North Dakota. My dudes and dudettes had to rush around, but I've arrived. Well, welcome in, Francis. It is great to see you. Doing good. Thank you, brother, says Jem. Very, very interesting. I mean, if we're looking at the PlayStation 2 version right here also of That's actually a really good question. Sorry, I was reading your... Hector says, how about a remaster of Haunting Ground, where the story is too much for today? See, that's the thing, right? I don't think it'd be too much for today, because honestly, if Silent Hill F does it correctly, look, there's really dark themes out there. People can't pretend like they're not out there, right? Like, people like to avoid or not see them, then don't play these type of games. But the truth is, different types of horror, whether it be physical horror, psychological horror, abuse, you know, like terrible things that could be done inside of a horror genre, right? It's horror is scary. I mean, like, I feel like no matter what, and I agree, I don't think that it would be too much of a problem. It just depends on if they want to take that risk. But I think it would sell pretty well, because the game is literally like $450 in the US here. Dennis says it's all corporatized and it shows past 2015 especially. I agree, man. Me, I always hold it off at 2016. I think that video games, I'm not saying games that came out after 2016 weren't legendary, because there were a lot that were, but I'm telling you, post 2016, we were pumping out gangster shit, really good quality video games. And we just don't get that now. And I mean that on a broad scale. I'm not saying we don't get good games, but we don't get that now. Ryan Wood says, the most fun I've had with RE is watching you guys play it. As someone who basically stuck in the house 95% of the time, Notorious, Bass, and Mr. Tibbs keep my chin up. You keep that chin up, soldier. And wake up in here. Much love to Ryan Wood. Everybody go make sure you say hello to him. He is a great dude. Let's see the final verdict of what was the final verdict? What we got here?
Sadly, this PS2 version is inferior to the original and almost every...
So is he going over ports here?
The others that
oh god, the Wii version was actually fun.
It should probably be clear this isn't a negative, and I know the fanboy in you is raging right now, but think about it. Is it the 10% of the game tied to the overall series that makes this a fun game for you? Or is it the action-packed gameplay? And this isn't hypothetical either. I'm honestly wondering. No matter how...
He's actually right here. I was just listening in. I wanted to jump ahead a little bit. But think about that for a second. It's actually kind of interesting that he's saying, like, was it that we love Resident Evil 4 for all of the mechanics that were finally added, or do we love it for the story? It's like, you could love it for both, but it's like, a lot of fans will sit there and argue, oh my god, and it's like, no, this game was revolutionary. It's amazing. I could play this game 100 times. It's my comfort game. But it is true. If you don't want to be subjected to unsavory themes, maybe avoid buying a horror game, says Gemini. I mean, straight to the point and right as always, Gem. I say that time and time again, privately to friends, privately to a couple of the people we have in this chat. I'm going to say it once, and I'm going to say it in the most polite way. If you don't like certain themes, you don't like certain horror, you don't like seeing blood, you don't like seeing this, that, and the other, don't pick up the game. Watch a trailer. Watch somebody else play it. But if we have to censor what makes a horror game good, like Rule of Rose was an okay game, but it had a pretty dark theme as well. And seriously, I'm just going to flat out say it. Haunting Ground had an abuse-themed game, right? It was abuse-themed. Physical abuse, right? Domestic abuse. It was a very strong construct on what they were trying to convey. And it was terrible, right? Anybody that's ever suffering with something like that, always feel free to reach out. There's somebody here for you, I promise. But the themes are strong. But we got to remember something here, everybody. This is real life. I'm so tired of us, cherry picking what the hell we want to pay attention to. These games are important. Ryan Wood says, much love to you, bro. I love you all. We love you, Ryan. Wake up, says Francis. I'm curious, what was your first experiencia with Resident Evil 4? Was it GameCube, PS2, Wii, 360, or PS4? Well, Hector, that is a fantastic question. Mine was actually the Nintendo GameCube. Me and my dad went and picked it up on its release day back on January 11th, 2005. It was an unbelievable, revelating experience in my life, man. I had goosebumps up and down my back and my neck. Rule of Rose was insane. I love it, says Hector. I love Rule of Rose, right? Maybe the mechanics were a little off, but it had a really good story. My ringtone, Resi Evil 3 Nemesis, 2018, much love. Let's go, Francis. And Gemini says, and I agree with him once again, it was awful, heartbreaking, and extremely powerful. The idea of visiting these themes in gaming. Hector says, GameCube first day. I'm air fiving you, my brother. That is fantastic, dude. Right on, right on. I'm giving you a clap. That's my man. Right on. But you know what? Gemini's right, guys. Because we're talking about the themes now. We got to just get it out in the open. You guys know I'm always transparent with you. I know you'll be transparent with me. The opening of The Last of Us made grown men cry around the world, myself included. Does that make me dislike the game? Hell nah, right? So, for those of you who know and don't know, right, we make TikToks and YouTube shorts. Gemini is my guy. He's on my team. We work together with a couple of other people. And I actually, while Gemini was working on parts of the TikTok, he had never really sat there and played The Last of Us. And if you guys know The Last of Us, which I'm sure you're seeing it everywhere because of Pedro Pascal and, you know, whatever that girl's name is who plays Ellie that doesn't even look like her. It literally, the opening scene devastated me. It was brutal to watch. And I'm sure by this point on, everybody knows the story, right? His daughter Sarah was accidentally shot. And I knew you guys were working together, says Lily. Absolutely. I mean, Gemini is a good friend of mine, Lily. We are brothers. And I will outwardly say that. I have no problem with it. The show has bad casting, says Hector. I definitely can't disagree with you there, man. Francis says, well, here's the thing, in my opinion. Now we get the remakes of games to not please us OG video gamers, but also for the new generation of gaming titles. Am I right? Or if you don't support these games. Now, I think that is a great point, Francis. Let me just take the mic out. You might hear a little bit of movement because I'm holding it now. I think that you're right. That it's giving people a chance on newer platforms to finally get to play these games in updated graphics, or, you know, maybe playing it for the first time. But you know what does that even better? A remake. Think about Silent Hill 2. So many people, and I'm going to be transparent here. I've been saying it the whole time. I think it's just in my head. I'm going to be real. When Silent Hill 2 came out, it was really popular, but it did not get the traction for psychological horror and all the little implications until like literally 15 years later when people started doing deep dives on it. You don't get any more games of favorites we all love and support. It's the truth. We don't get brand new ideas. Resident Evil 4 was a brand new idea. That's why I'm tying this in. That's why we're having this conversation while listening to some beautiful Resident Evil music. Resident Evil 4 was a fresh idea that was daring. It took a chance. Why can't game industries do that anymore? What the hell am I missing? I feel like I'm just watching reruns on TV instead of TV that's going on right now. That's the analogy I'll give. I feel like all I see is reruns. And I do agree, right? The Last of Us is a phenomenal game. I remember getting that game day one as well back in 2013. Had gotten a PS3 originally strictly for Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots. Absolutely phenomenal game. If you haven't played it, please go play it. All right, got the mic back in place. And then, in 2013, towards the end of its lifespan, which I found so interesting, it came out at the very end, the tail end of the PS3 lifespan, because I think the PS4 dropped in 2014, and I had gotten the Last of Us Remastered bundle. It came out and shocked the world. I mean, it was like another evolution of survival horror. Let's go ahead and finish up and see what Jared is going to say just towards the end, and then we're...
How you slice it, this is an amazingly fun experience. My only issue is that it would set the standard for RE games from this point on, and in my opinion, it's just not an RE game, plain and simple. And with that, I have prepared myself for the onslaught of disagreements in the comment section, knowing full well I've done this to myself. Well guys, thanks for sticking around, and make sure to tune in for the next video because we may just be going back to the very beginning. But until then, I'll see you guys next time right here on the Resident Evil Retrospective.
So shots were definitely fired at the end of that because he said that this did not feel like a Resident Evil. I mean, I guess that's fair to say. It didn't feel like a Resident Evil at the time. We loved it because it was a new innovation, but yeah, it didn't feel like the original Resident Evils. And maybe it started to drift the franchise away from what it was known for. But sometimes, like I said, you got to take risks to be successful. Francis says, I've been, or I don't know, could just be me. Remember back in the day, there were new title games would come out and you would be able to wait a few years before a new one is to be announced. But nowadays, we either get the yearly COD update, we get a Fortnite skin of Cowboy Bebop. I don't even know what's going on right over there. And we're just not getting the pure love and TLC that the franchise really deserves. Right? Let's take a look at RE4 OG's cut content. Wrote a word that is very bad. No, I don't want it from the remake. We want it from the OG. Francis also says gamers nowadays want more and more, and they complain afterwards. It doesn't give developers or a huge company like Capcom to make good games. I mean, I agree with that, right? And honestly, Monster Hunter Wilds is probably their best project recently. You know, that was obviously is a different part of Capcom that works on Monster Hunter than Resident Evil, but we haven't heard shit from Resident Evil 9. And that's one thing that worries me, man. It's like, it's almost like Silent Hill 2 Remake, right? You didn't hear a lot from Silent Hill 2 Remake, but then you did. And it was scary at first. And then they ended up listening to the fans. So I just hope a Resident Evil 9, if they're going to take more risks, they at least listen to what the fans want. Because remember, like I said earlier in the stream, don't sell your fan base short. It will bite you in the ass. Gemini says, it didn't feel like a conventional Resident Evil. I'll give them that. But what they did was necessary for the evolution of the RE as a franchise. He's right. He's right. I mean, like, we're going to sit here and we can't even debate that. He's right. Like, it's necessary. If we kept using the same formula, it's like listening to a band that makes the same type of music over and over again and then getting pissed when they change their style and you say that it sucks. It may not suck to somebody else, but they had to change it to evolve with the times. This video right here might be really good. Oh, man. Hold on a second. Where the hell was that? God damn, those boys were stunting. I can't even find it now. Those boys were stunting in that. That was the Capcom 5, which we'll hear about from the Obsessive Gamer, who is another fantastic content creator over here on YouTube. Give him a check out and definitely subscribe to him if you like his content. Let's go ahead and take a look at Resident Evil 4's complete history and cut content. We're going to go ahead and check that out.
A beloved classic and one of the best Resident Evil games to date, Resident Evil 4, a game that spans multiple generations and numerous consoles, considered by many one of the best games ever made, in fact. But the beloved horror game had a deep history of constantly changing, this leading it to have 4 prior builds before coming to what we know, 2 of which even spun off into their own games, and all leading into drama around...
Oh, I gotta pause it here. God damn. If you're not kitted from head to toe, I mean, look at the drip in the middle. Are you kidding me? That outfit is unbelievable. They knew that when they were bringing in these projects, and interestingly enough, the Capcom 5 they're going to talk about in this video, but it was PN03, Killer 7, Beautiful Joe, Resident Evil 4, and then an actual, I think it was Phoenix something. I can't see what the name of it was. It was actually a game that actually never released at all, I'm pretty sure. I don't even think it released in Japan. I could be wrong. But let's check out this video, guys, and see what the hell is up with the cut content of RE4.
GameCube exclusivity deal. A phase that sets it so far apart from the final game that many even call it Resident Evil 3.5. And so, in this special, we shall look back on the history and beta unused content of Resident Evil 4. Following the near end of Resident Evil 2's development in late 1997, plans were in place to make several new Resident Evil games, one being branded as a true sequel featuring Claire Redfield, one of the two protagonists of Resident Evil 2, the other being a spin-off entry called Resident Evil 1.9, featuring Jill Valentine of Resident Evil 1. But in addition, another Resident Evil was planned to portray the soldier Hunk from the fourth survival scenario of Resident Evil 2.
I'm in pain hearing that. I'm in a lot of pain hearing that. Most of you know here on the channel, or anybody that's new to the channel, Hunk is by far my favorite character. He has the most deep-rooted lore that we don't truly know. We don't know what he looks like under the mask, and we don't know much about him, but we do know that he is the Grim Reaper, right? He is Mr. Death himself. He is a legend, a special ops trained by the highest of Umbrella's echelon. Bro, nobody has trips like Japanese dudes, back then especially. My boy almost had a game. I really hope one day they come out with at least a DLC for just for him, you know? None of these like time attack modes or mercenary modes, which are fantastic, but I want a game.
As an alternate sequel to Resident Evil 2, all planned for the PlayStation 1, except for the true sequel that was being made for the Dreamcast.
So, real quick, that's something that we talked about earlier on, right? Resident Evil had a lot of different projects going on, including the idea of 4 already. They were already talking about it here. But Resident Evil Code Veronica, as we discussed in its retrospective, was supposed to be 3. But since Sony had trademarked the numbered entries of Resident Evil at the time, what was originally Resident Evil 1.9, or I like to call it Resident Evil Last Escape, turned into Resident Evil 3. And originally, Jill wasn't even going to be the main character. It was a spin-off game. It's kind of like how Silent Hill 4, The Room, was supposed to be a spin-off to Silent Hill, Room 302. But because it garnered so much money, these cash cows that we love decided, let's make it a numbered game.
But there was one problem. Sony had bartered for the limited rights of the Resident Evil 3 name for its own console already. This posed a problem for Capcom, as the true sequel, which was being made for the Sega Dreamcast, couldn't be called that. At that point, the alternate sequel was to be given that title instead, while the Dreamcast game was now simply titled as Resident Evil Code Veronica. The game was to take place this time on a cruise ship with Hunk, being caught in a viral outbreak while on a mission to retrieve the G-Virus. This setting was being made as a means to keep the series fresh after exploring a mansion and the city as its setting. However, by mid-1998, the Sony PlayStation 2 was revealed. This put pressure on Capcom on the idea of releasing this alternate sequel so close to the PlayStation 2's launch due to how far behind it was in development, as it could kill its sales. As such, the series creator and producer Shinji Mikami was tasked with pushing the game to the PlayStation 2. Hideki Kamiya, who was the director of this alternate sequel and also the director of Resident Evil 2, followed suit with this push to the next generation hardware. However, instead of continuing the same story, it was scrapped altogether as Hideki Kamiya wished to start over with the idea of utilizing the PlayStation 2's hardware for the story of this Resident Evil 3 game. But with this game restarting development as of mid-1998, it would mean that it could take a while for a main entry to hit the market. As a result, Capcom instead rebranded Resident Evil 1.9 as Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. And so the brainchild of Hideki Kamiya was now officially going to be called Resident Evil 4. The new Resident Evil 4 was officially announced to exist to the public by Shinji Mikami in December of 1999, along with its development for the PlayStation 2. the team started to plan out the potential of this new game. With Code Veronica's story already somewhat exploring the inner workings of the Umbrella Corporation, the company that had plagued the cast in the series up to then, an idea was being made to further expand on it by directly tackling the family that runs the company, the Spencers. The story was being penned by Noboru Sugimura, who wrote the critically acclaimed Resident Evil 2, and it featured a story that involved the protagonist Tony Redgraves, a police officer.
Okay, so I called him Tony Hargrave. I am a dunce. It's Tony Redgrave, which would make sense because of his red outfit. This is a very interesting piece of concept art, and it was very interesting how they were depicting Oswald E. Spencer. It was very gothic, right? With knights and castles. I mean, it almost gave like a Castlevania feel. It was almost like at this time, weirdly enough, because Castlevania was great over by Konami. It was like they were trying to encapsulate a mixture of multitude of things. And I think Tony Redgrave being the next main character would have been pretty interesting. I don't even know how it would have went. Francis says, been a Chris Redfield fan since the beginning of the Spencer Mansion of RE1 and never going to change. It still relates to the character to this game. Still RPD member stars. Right on, man. Chris was always a classic in my household. My dad loves Chris, right? Like, we just grew up playing these games and, right, seeing Chris Redfield in live action, Charlie Kowalski, who is fantastic, right, in the Keeper's Diary and does a lot of stuff with Resident Evil, the fandom. And you got to love those guys over there. Greg Smith, who plays Barry Burton. We got the guy who plays Albert Wesker. We have Linda, who plays Rebecca Chambers, right, when she was really young. I mean, just awesome stuff. It's so weird seeing what Resident Evil 4 was going to be, because I think if I would have picked this game up and played it now, I've been like, what is this? This is drastically different from what we were expecting. And what was, what was so interesting was that this story was being written by the same dude who took the reins of Hideki Kamiya's storytelling from 1.5 and gave us Resident Evil 2. So here I asked the question, do we think that with his writing and the game coming out, and again, remember, the game changed drastically by the time it was Devil May Cry, do we think that it would have been good? Do we think that this version of Resident Evil 4 would have been any good?
Sir, who was seemingly an invincible man with superhuman strength and intellect, all of which was attained due to the progenitor virus by Umbrella's biotechnology, a virus believed to be millions, if not billions of years old. The story would involve Tony uncovering the mysteries of his character that would lead him to...
Holy shit, that's Dante with a machine gun. I'm sorry, Tony Hargrave, Redgrave, you're Dante to me. It's very eerie and ominous how they went ahead and did this, man. Like, this is just, I always, like, find fascination in looking at, like, old content and what could have been, right? I mean, just unbelievably lucrative with what they did and how they changed things. I mean, the development of these games were anything but easy. I don't think there was a simple Resident Evil that came out. And honestly, I think, absolutely, we love Hunk, says Ryan. Yes, sir! Honestly, I think Resident Evil 8, although it may not be the biggest fan favorite, people do really enjoy it. I think by them saying that the progenitor virus was around for thousands of years and that's how Dante was able to transform into the whatever demon or creature he was going to, I think they kind of tied that up well with, like, Oswald E. Spencer being Mother Miranda's predecessor. It kind of fits the mold. No pun intended.
To Malay Island, the home of the Umbrella facility. This would eventually lead into the revelation of Tony being the son of Oswald E. Spencer, the founder of Umbrella, as well as a plotline featuring Tony's twin brother, Paul Redgraves. The major catch for all this, however, was that Hideki Kamiya wanted Tony and the game to be a cool and stylish action game instead. The departure went as far as to get rid of the fixed camera angles and the pre-rendered backgrounds that the series had been known for, as it just would not look cool enough for Tony Redgraves on screen. In fact, he was designed to have a strong appearance dressed in red and black and employed a heroic look with his trench coat. Top that off with not only wielding regular firearms, but also demonic weapons, all in an attempt to make the player feel even cooler.
just a badass picture. It looks like He-Man there. You know, it's a really... it's very mind-boggling to see this. Gemini says we probably would have enjoyed it for what it was, but it would have been too bizarre for me. I think the gradual progression through viruses and parasites made more sense. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, right? But I love to hear everybody's take, and I think that was well said, Gem, because really, I mean, this is just so far-fetched to what Resident Evil was. And yeah, Resident Evil has kind of drifted away from what it was really known for. But this is just the first of many parts of this game that we're going to cover here.
For inspiration,
did you notice that the graphics inside of the castle kind of look like Resident Evil 4 castle graphics?
It just would. The game now being its own series,
right?
Tony Redgraves became Dante, who is now written as a half-demon and was incredibly strong and invincible due to
totally changed it up.
And seemingly, Paul Redgraves became Virgil, or in this case...
My favorite character in Devil May Cry.
The rest of the cast stayed the same, save for some redesigns, especially the female lead Trish, who had many designs from rather refined to something a lot closer to the final DMC design. Meanwhile, Dante's parents and any plots around the Umbrella Corporation were written out entirely for a more demonic story about the Sons of Sparta.
So that's interesting, right? We have the style build and then we have the castle build. Those are the two different versions. And obviously in today's stream, we're really focusing a lot on the Devil May Cry version, right? And there's going to be a part 2 of this. I'm going to let you guys know that right now. It's going to probably be this weekend because I'm off this entirety of this weekend. So we're going to definitely do a part 2 of RE4 just because it would be such an injustice to only do this in nearly 2 hours, right? Lily the Cat says, I really love the whole cult vibe they went with. It made for much scarier for me. I agree. And if you notice with Devil May Cry, there were like puppet creatures that you would fight in the original one, which kind of gave way to that Hookman feeling of like puppets and creatures. So I feel like everything was intertwined,
With that, many
truthfully.
of the enemies that did appear in the build also did appear in Devil May Cry, but prior to that, they had many ties to the Resident Evil mythos too, such as the Blades, which were to be a hunter variant.
Wow, look at
The
that.
Splat G-Crow, that was to be a G-Virus infected crow. And the undead humans, as with series tradition, except even more monstrous. Many of the others were cut altogether. And so, with Resident Evil 4 becoming Devil May Cry, development had to restart again in 2001, this time with designer Hiroshi Shibata.
And that we are going to go ahead and cover in the next stream. But we're going to talk for a little bit. We're going to talk about the castle build and everything with the Hookman and all of that in the next stream. But man, we really covered quite a bit. But like I said, you can't cover Resident Evil 4 without giving it a part 2. Francis says, bro, just think of all we got with Resident Evil. Movies all we wanted from George A. Romero, which, yes, guys, I am going to be doing a retrospective on the George A. Romero documentary that came out not that long ago. But we're going to do that at the end when we get all the retrospectives out of the way. And yes, we'll be covering the remakes. So I'm very, very excited to do this with you guys. This is just a dream of mine to be able to spend time with people that value and enjoy the same things that I do, right? I mean, look at how beautiful this is. God damn. I mean, that picture definitely isn't beautiful. I mean, are they kidding me with that picture? Give me this one. This one looks good. Zoom in. We're struggling here. We're back. All right, guys. And right now, that is going to end our part 1 of the Resident Evil 4 retrospective. Part 2 will be announced in a community post as well as in the Discord that we have, the Notorious Space. If any new members are interested in wanting to join the Discord to check out some of our content, to have conversations with me privately, to go ahead and learn more about the content that I do, or just chat, right? Just connect. Feel free to message me or go right to the Resident Evil section of our channel, and in every bio of every video is the Discord link, as well as in the bio of the YouTube channel. And with that, we also have the TikTok. I am a part of Team Hitless, right? I do a lot of no damage runs. And I can't wait to continue this conversation as well, Geminem. This was a fantastic conversation. I gotta sit here for a second and really just thank you guys. Where is the Discord? Gem, if you could do me a favor and drop the link in here for our buddy Hector, I would love to have him in the Discord. And anybody else who wants to be a part of the Discord, you are more than welcome to be a part of it, right? This is an open Discord. We'll get that link for you. Or how can we private chat? Well, if we get into the Discord, we definitely have different areas to talk and just have conversation. And we could really break down and just talk about anything Resident Evil or any survival horror that you really want to talk about. Geminem is taking care of that. He is a moderator on everything I do, so he's going to go ahead and get a link for us to the Discord in here. And we can continue this conversation. Thank you guys so much. So much. There's the link right there. Feel free to click it. Feel free to join. And we'll set you up with a roll. Guys, this was so much fun once again. Thank you for welcoming me in. I love you guys. Thank you for supporting so much. And if you have not yet, please like this video. It helps gain traction and engagement. You could share pictures for, as you know, as long as you follow, and obviously I know you will, Hector, as long as you follow Discord rules and, like, you know, it's related to survival horror or a video game or whatever. You're absolutely allowed to. We have different columns over there. So absolutely. And with that, guys, this is where we end part 1. Thank you guys so much. And once again, this is the Notorious Base signing off. We'll see you for part 2 sometime this weekend. Stay on the lookout. Before we leave, Francis says, we should have a chat discussion more about Resi Evil convos with your brother Base, or to hear your voice. Let's go! We can make something happen. I'll catch you guys this weekend for part 2 of the Resident Evil 4 retrospective. Peace out, guys.